Wendy is a former MATLAB user. He even wrote a book about MATLAB, then turned open source. So let's all give a big round of applause to Wendy for coming to the open source side. Everyone, please welcome Wendy to the stage.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and thank you for inviting me to be here today. And I'm really happy to be able to share a journey that I've been on with R as my companion. So any journey, I think, has to have a destination, and the destination for hello?
On your screen, see where it says stop sharing and hide. Could you click hide so everyone can see all your slides?
Oh, hide? Like that?
Yeah,
okay, perfect. You're welcome. I wasn't sure if I was hearing things because I just heard this little voice.
On your shoulder.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you. All right. So so here's my destination essentially is to get R approved for production so we could use it for production purposes at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So in terms of this talk, I'm going to talk a little bit more about who I am and what is a federal statistical agency, because I think that sets some context for this journey or this road that I'm on. And then I'll talk about some of the rocks and the obstacles that I've encountered along the way and let you know where I am now, because I'm not quite at my destination yet. So a little bit about my education. I got my bachelor's degree. I had a double major in math and physics from a small liberal arts school in Lawton, Oklahoma. From there, I got a research fellowship at it's kind of a offshoot, off-campus school, part of the George Washington University, but it was at NASA Langley Research Center, and I got my master's then in engineering. From there, I went to work at the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Dahlgren, Virginia, and they supported my PhD work at George Mason University, where I got my PhD in computational sciences and informatics with an emphasis on computational statistics. And about 8 years ago, I moved to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and a condition of getting the job was that I had to take some courses on how to work with data from a complex sample design. So I ended up going back to school as a much older student, which of course was pretty challenging. So I said I worked for the Naval Surface Warfare Center. There I did basic and applied research in support of the Marine Corps. From there I went to the Office of Naval Research, and that's a funding agency, sort of similar to the National Science Foundation. But there was a lot of fun. I wasn't able to do research or analysis or anything, but instead I came up with the research ideas and I gave money to people to have the fun of doing it. After a while, I went to what I call a dark agency, still in the Department of Defense, where I had the opportunity then to re-engage with analyzing data. And then, as I said, about 8 years ago, I left Defense and came to BLS. So here's where BLS is located. This is our building. It's called the Postal Square Building. Right now, I'm talking to you from my home because we're full-time telework. But once we get back, this is where I'll be. And it's right across from Union Station. And it's actually part of the Smithsonian. That door that you see right there is I guess if you can see my cursor, that's the entrance to the Postal Museum. So if you can get there, it's a great place to visit. So some of you may not know much about the statistical agencies, and it wasn't until, of course, I came to BLS that I really even knew that they existed, I'm ashamed to say. But anyway, there's 13 of them. One of them is BLS, and you can see from this list that they span a lot of areas. So from economics, labor, crime, transportation, demographics, education, agriculture, and a lot more. Now, the reason why this is important and why it impacts this road that I'm on is because each of these agencies are responsible for producing very important official statistics. These statistics are used by the public, by decision makers, lawmakers, really everybody. And so here's just an example of some of the ones that at least the BLS does. And one you probably are familiar with, which is the monthly employment situation. Those are produced by the BLS and also the Consumer Price Index. So the reason why this is important is because by law, we have to produce and publish these statistics. And the production of these statistics relies on our IT infrastructure as well as the software that we use to produce them. So we can't just go to the public and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we can't give you the employment situation this month because our software failed or we had some glitch." So we have to be very, very careful. Now, a former commissioner of BLS, Dr. Erica Grosjean, kind of created this acronym, which I think is, well, really it's at the heart of what we do and how we produce data and the statistics. That has to be accurate, objective, relevant, timely, and accessible. And again, the software that we use to produce our statistics, that we need to account for all of these important priorities. So what about this rocky road that I'm on? Well, I mentioned my destination, which was to get R approved for production at BLS, but what was the start of my journey? Well, I was first exposed to R when I was working on my PhD. And when I was working on these slides, I was trying to think if I really had used R back then. And I'm pretty sure that I did, because this was in the early 90s. And around that time, S plus was around. So I know I used S plus, but there was also R there. And during my time at the Office of Naval Research, I didn't have a chance to really do much research. So I didn't use R. But then once I got back when I got back into analysis and I was at this dark agency, I was sort of jumping in at the deep end of the pool, so to speak. So as you might suspect at an agency like this that there were classified networks. And so we couldn't just go to CRAN because these networks weren't connected to the outside world. So you couldn't just go to CRAN and install our packages. But one of the statisticians there, what he did was, like, twice a year, he would go to CRAN and essentially download everything off of CRAN and get it checked out, make sure it was okay. They would install it on the network. So essentially, on our networks, we had CRAN mirrors where we could, install packages in R and use it. The other thing I did when I was at this agency was I developed a 2-day Intro to R course. And I'm not quite sure why I did it, but anyway, I did it and taught it several times there. And it was, people liked it. The other thing that I came to appreciate was that they would set up these communities of practice. So these would be groups of, colleagues that would come together and talk, they'd have this common interest and, they would help each other out. So I kind of took those ideas with me to BLS. And I kind of revised the course and taught it. I've been teaching it at BLS probably 2 or 3 times a year. And I think it's, probably the most popular course there. And the other thing I did was I started our users group at the agency. And I have to say, I didn't ask permission to do that. I just kind of did it. And it's been very successful, and it's still going very strong. The other thing that's important, about this journey that I'm on is the fact that BLS uses SAS. Not totally, but it uses it in particular for the employment situation to get those numbers out. And many of the statistical agencies use SAS. Now, as you might expect, this is government. We can't just, install whatever we want on our computers. And I have to say that BLS is pretty open to us, installing things on our computers as long as we ask for permission and they go through this kind of a security check and an approval process. But the approval distinguishes between whether the software is going to be used for research or production. And so one of the problems has been, what does it mean to be production software? And nobody really had a good definition of that. It's pretty vague. But essentially, in my opinion, it would be whatever software you use to produce official statistics. So here's a graphic that kind of shows the approval history for R, and the green is the, so this starts from 2015 to current time, and the green means it was approved for production, and the blue means it's approved for research. So you might be saying to yourself, well, Wendy, what's going on? You've already reached your destination. It's been approved for production. Well, as you can see, it's not right now. And what's happened along the way is that it gets approved for production. I'm all excited about it. And then somebody says, oh, wait a minute, we can't have that. And so then it gets kind of kicked back to being for research purposes only. So I'm still not at my destination. Now, my colleague Brandon Cobb developed this graphic as well as the previous one to show kind of what's the status of software BLS for production use and research, and then by what's the software used for. And this first column, so the production is on across the top in green. And if you look under the languages that are approved for production, you have Python. And if you look all the way to the right under the other block, you see Anaconda and QGIS. Those, of course, are all open source. And one of the issues or comments we've had about why R is not approved for production, it's, well, we need to be able to just call somebody up if we have a problem. That's why we like to have commercial software, commercially supported software. So, but, here we have examples where open source is used for production. So why use R? Well, this is predominantly an R conference, so I'm sure we all, love R, and we know why we want to use it. But here's some of the things that we've tried to use as a selling point. I think the fact that functionality or new research is often implemented in R, and then it doesn't become available in commercial software for a long time, if ever. When we hire people right out of school, they usually know R or Python, but they don't know SAS. So you have to train them. And I think there's this opportunity for innovation when we use R. And I'm going to give you just a couple of quick examples. So there's a survey we have called the Occupational Employment Statistics Survey. It publishes annually statistics on employment and wages for over 800 occupations and I think various industries and for at different geographic levels. Now the maps that they produce, I'm going to show you, they're static and they're produced using SAS. So here's an example of the user interface. You have these drop-down menus and you could select the occupation and then what statistic you want. And essentially what they do is they use SAS to create a map for every combination of statistic and occupation and so on. And so then these are just kept on a server somewhere. And essentially these interfaces, these drop-down menus are just used to access what file it is on the server. So it's really not dynamic at all. And then in 2015, and I thought to myself, well, this would be we could create a Shiny app that would kind of create a version of that that would be truly dynamic. So that's what we did. We had two economists, so these weren't even, statisticians or computer programmers. So they had little to no R experience and almost zero R Shiny experience. And we asked them to do this, but the thing is that they knew the data. And so just for 2 days a week, and I think within 2 months, they had an app built that would kind of do this dynamically. So here's some screenshots. The legend would change and the title, and you could change, I think, color and and you could hover over the areas and get information. The other thing is it would also create this table based on the data that you had displayed in the map, and you could then download the data to use yourself. Another, Brandon Kopp actually did this one too. He created this app for our publications department. They wanted to sort of automatically generate text that could be used in news statements, because a lot of times it's not necessarily boilerplate, but it could be somewhat similar, and then you would just kind of put the right numbers in there. So in order to demonstrate what he could do, what he was doing, he said, well, let me just put this in our Shiny app, and he could show it to stakeholders so they could see what are the possibilities. So the point about these examples is the fact that these weren't created by our IT people. They were created by the subject domain experts. And that's kind of where I think innovation happens. Now, I love this sign because this really, I think, illustrates what I feel my road has been like these past several years. So just some of the issues that we've encountered. First of all, one is that people do still want to use R for research, so they want to be able to just, install whatever packages they want. Whereas on the production side, they say, well, we have to have more control over the versions and so forth. There's also this idea of SAS versus R. When I started this, I think that people thought, especially in the IT department, thought if we get R approved for production, that means we're saying we're getting rid of SAS and we have to convert everything that's in SAS to R. And nobody's ever said that, because that would be a huge undertaking, right? Remember, our monthly employment numbers, they have to go out. And nobody's saying that. We're just saying where it makes sense to use R, let us do it. And then the other sort of pushback that we often get is, well, you have people in the subject domain experts developing the R Shiny apps. What happens when they leave? What are you going to do with the updates or fixing it or whatever at that point? Well, you have that same problem with the Java programmers in the IT department. So there's got to be ways that we could kind of mitigate that risk. So it happened about oh gosh, I don't even know how long ago now, but maybe like 2 or 3 years ago. I was ready to get R approved for production. The executive said, no, we just need to go back and do a process to approve software in general for production. So we did that and presented it to the executives a year ago. And they just, massive pushback. And they said, all right. So at that point, I was kind of ready to just quit. But somebody, our deputy commissioner, said, well, no, let's just get a smaller team. We'll take this process that you developed and fill it out for R. So we did that, and that was a good exercise, because we kind of revised the process. And then instead of going back to the executives and saying, okay, give us the approval, we said, well, let's just have a little smaller approval team that has the authority to approve it and see what they think of our application. So it's in their hands right now. We want a quick turnaround. We don't want this team to be taking 6 months to give us an answer. So we're hoping to have an answer in, about a month. So we'll see what happens. So what have I learned in this process? Well, one of them is just be patient, keep trying. I think as we've gone on, one of the folks in the IT department where, 5 years ago, he was sort of pushed back with us. He's now completely on board and very supportive. And so I think you just have to, kind of plant a lot of seeds and, nurture them, and you'll get there. So I'm hopeful. And I just want to finish with a plug or, an advertisement that several years ago I started an Interagency R users group. And we're just kind of informal. And if you're interested in, R used in the government, then just send me an email and I could add you to our list.
Great. It definitely seems like a bumpy road, and that's something I've seen at many, many federal agencies too. And some move at different paces. Depends, what their mission is and who's there. So thank you for fighting the good fight for R, especially someone that used to be a MATLAB user and coming over to the open source. It's really amazing to hear.